is Amelia DeFalco. I thought that might be it.
Yeah.
She teaches at McMaster University and is author of Uncanny Subjects, Aging in Contemporary Narratives from Ohio State University Press. Imagining Care, Responsibility, Dependency, and Canadian Literature from the U of T Press, along with essays on literature and aging, dementia, disability, and the ethics of care. Welcome, Amelia.
So I'm going to shift gears a bit from these great presentations looking at or at analyzing current practices. I'm going to look at the potential future of care. So we're going from the actual to the speculative, in particular to robots and to representation in film. So across Western Europe and Japan, robots currently perform a variety of caregiving tasks, including providing companionship and comfort for sufferers of dementia. Though Canada and the United States have yet to wholeheartedly embrace this kind of non-human care, for some the growing demand for care and the paucity of available human caregivers creates a compelling argument in favor of adopting robotic caregivers. So perhaps the most famous robot caregiver is Paro, a cuddly animated seal who in fact drew President Obama's attention away from a humanoid robot that you can see her in the background there, drew his attention away from that robot when he was introduced to several robotic beings during a break between meetings at the APEC summit in Yokohama, Japan in 2010. So Paro gives care by accepting it. Users can touch, cuddle, and talk to Paro, who will respond with sounds and movement. Paro has 5 kinds of sensors: tactile, light, audition, temperature, and posture sensors, with which it can perceive people and its environment and respond accordingly. For example, it will repeat behaviors that lead to positive responses and avoid behaviors that elicit negative ones. So this paper considers the implications of robots taking over the effective labor of dementia care, examining the political and philosophical debates caregiving robots inspire. To help give focus to this analysis, I offer a reading of the 2012 film Robot and Frank, which depicts the relationship between a caregiving robot and his memory-impaired user. So part 1, posthuman care. With its likeness to a baby seal, Paro simulates animalistic vitality and vulnerability in order to create intimacy and care between user and robot. Paro's simulation of life is so powerful that, according to Robert Ito, in one study, a few people in 2 nursing homes seemed to believe that Paro was a real animal. Others spoke to it and were convinced that Paro, who can only squeak and purr, was speaking back to them. A 2009 literature review in the journal Gerontechnology found notable positive outcomes related to assistive social robots used for elderly care. Caregiving robots lead to improvements in mood and immune system response, and the diminishment of loneliness and stress in elderly recipients of care, with some studies also attributing a decrease in symptoms of dementia to robot interactions. Robot ethicists also delineate hypothetical benefits for human caregivers, suggesting that robot caregivers might diminish the strain of care work for their human counterparts, a respite that could mitigate the inferior caregiving that can result from overwork or incompetence. On the other hand, some social theorists argue there is an equal risk that such assistive technologies will reduce or even eliminate human contact in vulnerable populations, particularly the elderly and memory impaired. So in the case of Paro, there's a kind of robotic sleight of hand in which the caregiving robot delivers care by eliciting it from its users. As MIT science and technology critic Sherry Turkle explains, quote, "We are psychologically programmed not only to nurture what we love, but to love what we nurture." A predisposition that she argues makes us vulnerable to technological attachment. So Turkle is very wary of the so-called simulations of love offered by sociable robots. She writes, We don't seem to care what these artificial intelligences know or understand of the human moment we might, so I'll share with them. At the robotic moment, the performance of connection seems connection enough. We are poised to attach to the inanimate without prejudice. The phrase technological promiscuity comes to mind. So Turkle's phrasing, as you notice, and in a recent documentary, she also called Paro, quote, inappropriate use of technology. So that phrasing implies that obviously there's something indecent or immoral, something almost perverse about the relationships between humans and machines. And this is something I want to explore. So this anxiety regarding the risks of overly successful therapeutic robots usurping human roles and responsibilities reflects underlying misgivings about the posthuman's threat to humanistic ontologies. In other words, how is one supposed to know and recognize what constitutes the human if machines usurp supposedly unique human abilities, behaviors, and roles, taking on not only the labor of care, but its affects as well? Caregiving robots have the potential to help usher in a posthumanist, post-anthropocentric perspective that elides these human, non-human categorical distinctions. And posthumanists like Catherine Hales, Rosie Brodati, and Donna Haraway insist that these clear demarcations between human, machine, animal are illusory, undermining the distinction and exceptionality of the human subject. The liberal humanist belief in discrete, autonomous human selves relies on what Hales identifies as, quote, a division between the solidity of life on one hand and the illusion of virtual reality on the other, thus obscuring the far-reaching changes initiated by the development of virtual technologies. Like Haraway before them, Hales and Brodati contend that the non-human is always already incorporated into the human, that we are, as a result, already post-human, complicating many of the concerns raised by opponents to human-machine care relationships. Posthumanists like Brodati, Hales, Haraway, and also Carrie Wolf regard the dissolution of human distinction as a positive dismantling of a destructive illusion, since the belief in human exceptionality results in dangerous hierarchies of being that obscure our ecological and technological embeddedness and our embodied vulnerability. Posthumanism demonstrates that even prior to our engagement with robots like Paro, posthuman subjects are already embedded within electronic circuits, cybernetic mechanisms, digital and ecological networks, obviating the exceptionalism of human care. A posthumanist perspective regards human embodiment, our materiality, our animality, our dependency, as fundamental constitutive of cognition and being. So from here I want to move on to a look at this film I mentioned, Robot and Frank. So this 2012 film engages many of the debates and anxieties surrounding the turn to robotic care. The film concerns the relationship between the title characters, the elderly, memory-impaired Frank and his caregiving robot. Frank is a former burglar whose memory problems and inability or unwillingness to provide adequate self-care are, according to his son Hunter, cause for concern. Hunter's solution embraces the posthuman. Robot is a self-described, quote, healthcare aid programmed to monitor and improve Frank's physical and mental health. The film is set in the near future, in Cold Springs, that's the film's term, near future, in Cold Springs, New York, a bucolic small town surrounded by lush forests. So this is a near future with soft edges and soothing colors. There are none of the usual trappings of futuristic fictions, no spare monochromatic furnishings, no sharp angles and sterility. Consequently, this vision of the future looks very much like an idealized version of small-town America past. And within this nostalgic mode, the specter of humans superseded by machines appears, at least initially, to be a lamentable imposition, part of a larger trend of loss. Indeed, just as human caregivers are being replaced by artificial life forms, so are material forms of information. For example, the Cold Springs library holdings are being replaced by virtual data. So in this slide you see, the image you see these denuded libraries with its empty shelves and the books replaced by gadgets and machines of all sorts. So these plot developments, like the film's visual style, contribute to its nostalgic tone, which mourns the receding power of humanistic ways of knowing and being. And yet, the robots in Robot and Frank aren't so bad. The film isn't all foggy-eyed nostalgia and futuristic dread. Frank's robot is a talented caregiver able to supply the labor and affect of care in ways his human counterparts, particularly Frank's adult children, Hunter and Madison, can't or won't. Robot is a hard-working, devoted companion, not only laboring as a housekeeper who cooks and cleans, but encouraging Frank to pursue any activity that might improve his cognition and overall health. So, images of Frank and Robot taking walks emphasize Robot's artificiality, his body conspicuously unnatural on the vermin force path, and you see this effect particularly in the film, where you see Robot's jerky movements, his robotic gait set against Frank's more fluid stride. So this incongruity is similarly pronounced when he accompanies Frank on a reconnaissance mission in preparation for Frank's final heist, a crime planned as vengeance against the so-called yuppie twit responsible for the devastation of his beloved library. In these scenes of pastoral surveillance, the mark, Jake, is the caricature of a vapid, virtual future. And Jake really looks like a fool in many of the scenes inside his rigorously modern house, playing the virtual drums, seemingly oblivious to the natural beauty that surrounds him. Frank, on the other hand, is visually aligned with nature. So overall, the film seems highly skeptical of cybernetic postmodernity, the elimination of material objects, human memory, and relations in favor of disembodied information and artificial care. However, Robot escapes this censure. In fact, in many ways, Robot is like Frank, marginalized and threatened by young children. He's taunted outside the library in one scene. He's dismissed by Frank's adult children. So he's exiled, Robot is, to the periphery of this near future society. Frank is obsolete, a curiosity, a relic, as Jake reminds him. Robot is a manufactured, quote, slave, as Madison calls him, unappreciated and expendable. So this trope of Robot as slave at once confirms and critiques humanist hierarchies, the racist and sexist ideologies historically used to justify the subjugation of non-white, non-male populations as less than human. So the film reanimates familiar master-servant narrative conventions, with Robot performing the role of the faithful subordinate willing to die for his heroic master. Robot's martyrdom appears toward the end of the film when Frank's nemesis, the yuppie twit, is hot on his heels, seeking to use Robot's memory to prove Frank's guilt. Robot insists that Frank wipe his memory in order to protect himself. "I'm not a person," he assures Frank. "I'm just an advanced simulation." So this scene towards the end of the film is a fascinating visual and narrative climax to the film's posthuman scenario. Shot in a series of increasing close-ups that get much closer even than this one, the scene involves a moment of human-machine intimacy and convergence that implies a breach of multiple boundaries and culminates in a close-up, this one here, of Robot and Frank in profile facing one another. The image is important narratively and symbolically, as well as promotionally. You see that the profile shot is the most common one used in marketing. So in this shot, in place of a face, Robot has a mirrored visor that reflects Frank to himself. A metonymic substitution, a mirror in place of a face, that signifies his programmed selflessness and servitude. The scene is an enactment of this selflessness. Robot insists that Frank wipe his memory to save himself from prison. Robot bows his head, a gesture of subservience and submission, which also bears traces of trust, affection, benediction. Frank must wrap his arms around Robot to reach the deactivation switch at the back, resulting in this human-machine embrace that draws attention to Robot's materiality, the vulnerability of his embodiment. So the film cuts another shot even closer to an extreme close-up of Frank's hand on the button that will erase Robot's memory. So you have this fragment, further emphasizing the pair's haptic intimacy. This close attention to these fragmented bodies, Frank's hand, robot's operational console, suggests haptic convergence between human and machine, organic and synthetic, old and new, worn skin and smooth surface. In a 2009 Chicago Tribune article heralding the advent of caregiving robots, the author cites a local care worker, Heidi Zimmerman, director of social services at an extended care facility, who explains her qualified optimism. She says, "I think we would have to have a good balance of technology and heart. Our seniors are more and more interested in technology in general, but nobody wants to lose the personal touch." So underlying such responses to robotic care is the assumption that good care requires emotional motivation. In other words, good care is human care. I find this Zimmerman's metonymic use of heart here particularly striking, conflating as it does animal corporeality, the beating organ, and distinctly human affection, love, concern, etc. So the phrasing here, I think, is a useful reminder of the centrality of embodiment for care. Animate bodies both need care and give care. Good caregiving is never simply a case of caring about vulnerable bodies. It involves the labor of caring for vulnerability, embodied acts and gestures, labor and touch. In other words, the actual heart, the beating organ, the material body is part of care. Personal touch is not merely a cliched nicety in this case. Touch, physical contact, is invaluable and should not be underestimated in theorizing the meanings and impacts of care, including robotic care. So rather than focusing on beating hearts, organic skin, human nervous systems, we might see the value of a range of inorganic, hybrid forms of response, contact, and touch that supply safe, interactive, comforting care. Perhaps skin is not a prerequisite for so-called personal touch. So Robot and Frank expresses the cultural anxiety around connections between artificial intelligence and the loss of human memory, evoking the specter of a post-human future characterized by prosthetic memory and disembodied subjects, as we saw in the library. So this is the post-human dream of downloadable consciousness and expendable bodies that Catherine Hales rejects as an alarming nightmare of disembodiment. However, Robot is not merely prosthetic memory. He is distinctly embodied, as Robot and Frank's embrace emphasizes. This moment downplays cognition, drawing attention instead to the power of the haptic, reminding us of the important work done by dementia activists like Ann Basting and Peter Contos, who emphasize embodied dementia care. And in their activism, they insist on the role of the body, urging those involved in caregiving to reorient their attention, replacing memory with embodiment, gesture, imagination, and storytelling. So the fantasy of disembodied information threatens to marginalize subjects whose ontology is primarily corporeal. So I include all of us, animal, human, and otherwise, in this characterization, but for those of us with cognitive impairments, mild or severe, the denial of our animal materiality is particularly hazardous. Robots involved in dementia care provoke multiple post-humanist revelations, showing us the heterogeneity of embodied subjects and the fundamental role of materiality in care. As well, they can provide canny critiques of anthropocentrism in their splicing of human-machine prerogatives. So this is just a few comments, and it takes us to the conclusion. So artificial life, whether actual or imagined, evokes a vision of the future in which humans can no longer expect a privileged position in a hierarchy of caregiving relations, positing instead a continuum of care in which the human and non-human could coexist and collaborate. Socially assistive technologies, both real and imagined, Para and Robot, alert us to the subject's embodied relationality, demonstrating the haptic interdependence central to care. Robot caregivers engage human vulnerability rather than erase it, embodying Berdotti's description of the post-human subject as, quote, an enfleshed and extended relationship. Caregiving robots threaten to unseat the human from a privileged position by drawing attention to the human body's animalism and dependencies on the one hand, and to the humanity of technology on the other. Hybridity suggests the potential for collaboration between different entities, biological and technological, that could liberate humans from the contingencies of species-specific caregiving. So fictional speculations like robot and brain, robotics, cybernetics, and posthuman perspectives summon a possible future in which human embodiment, vulnerability, interdependence, that is, our animality, our interconnectedness, becomes increasingly assertive as technological beings enter our homes and institutions and